We're going to go ahead and take a look at solving quadratic equations today by factoring. Now we're going to start off saying, okay, suppose we have two numbers multiplied together to give you 12. Well, how many ways could that happen? Well, you could have 12 and 1, or 6 and 2, or 3 and 4, or 4 and 3, or 2 and 6, or 1 and 12. But you could also have a half and 24, or 2/3 and 18. And it goes on and on. So really, two numbers multiplied together to give you something like 12, there's infinitely many different possibilities. However, if you have two numbers multiplied together to give you 0, it's a lot different. Either it's going to be some number times 0, or 0 times some number. So there's really only two possibilities when you have p times q to give you 0. Either p is 0 or q is 0. That's the only way it can work. So you have your choice of infinitely many different possibilities to choose from, or only two possibilities. And if you're trying to find the solutions, more than likely you're going to want just only to search for two possibilities. Let's go ahead and solve this one by factoring, and we're going to use that. We're going to set this equal to 0, because if it's set equal to 0, we know we only have two possibilities. To set this equal to 0, we're going to have to go ahead and add a 4x to both sides. So then we get this here. Then we're going to go ahead and factor it. And your first step in factoring is always to pull out your greatest common factor. So we're going to pull an x out. Then you got to think, okay, an x times what gives me an x squared? And that's an x. Or an x times what is a 4x? And well, that's a 4. Still equal to 0. We now have this written so we have two things multiplied together to give you 0. The only way you can get 0 for your answer is if the first thing is 0, or if the second parenthesis is 0. So the first one's already solved. Solve the second one, we end up getting x to be a -4. If it was not set equal to 0 and we tried to factor it, then you'd have infinitely many different possibilities to choose from. So before you'd want to try to factor, you want to have it set equal to 0. These are the only two values right here, 0 and -4, that make your original statement true. So let's go ahead and solve this one here by factoring. But once again, you need to have it set equal to 0. I'm going to bring everything over to the left side where my x squared is already positive. So subtract 5x from both sides, subtract 2 from both sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor this. Now to factor this, I'm going to put a 3x in the beginning of one parenthesis and an x in the beginning of the other parenthesis. Now, the question is, what do we have to put at the ends? Well, what we put at the ends right here and right here has to multiply together to give us a -2. Well, you could have a +1 and a -2. Or you could have a -1 and a +2. And it's just a matter of trying those to see what works. In this case, if we try the +1 here and the -2 over here, it's going to work. Once again, if you check your outer terms, that's a -6x, and your inner terms is a 5x, gives you the correct middle term. So that means we have it factored correctly. You'll notice we have two parentheses multiplied together, two things multiplied together to give you 0. Either the first parenthesis is 0, or the second parenthesis is 0. So we get x to be, when we solve the second one, to be 2. Solve the first one, you have to go ahead and subtract 1, divide by 3. These are the two solutions that make your original statement true. So now let's go ahead and do this one. Set equal to 0 by adding 4. Then you want to go ahead and factor it, and since we've done factoring before, we're not going to go ahead and spend a lot of time on that. Set each parenthesis equal to 0. Second parenthesis equal to 0. Subtract 1, subtract 4, divide by 2, divide by 3. So you want to go ahead, make sure it's set equal to 0 before you factor. Once you have factored it, after it was set equal to 0, set each one of your factors of things multiplied together to give you 0. So let's do this one here. We'll add 9 to both sides. We'll factor it. In this case, both parentheses are the same. You could set each one equal to 0. And in each case, you get 3. But since it's listed twice, we only really need to list it once because it's only one different answer, and we get 3. Now, this one here is the reverse process. Here, they're giving you the answers, and they want you to work backwards to get the equation. So you're starting off with this. So we have our x being 6. Now, it says with integers, they don't want fractions. Well, we have a fraction here. How do we get rid of dividing by 3? We could multiply both sides by 3. Now, you'll notice as we go back here, we need to have this set equal to 0 and this set equal to 0 so we would know what to put into our parentheses. So that's what we're going to want to do here. We want to have each one of these things set equal to 0. So we'll have to add 2. We'll have to subtract 6. When the two things are set equal to 0, it tells us what we need to put into our parentheses. Now, they're looking for it not with parentheses. They want it all worked out, so we're going to have to FOIL this. When you FOIL this, we end up getting a 3x squared minus 16x minus 12.